Corey here. Let's touch on an issue that I see coming up constantly that I thought I would address, and I'll have future videos on this and also future resources for how different people can take advantage of what I'm about to talk about. So let's talk about the issue of access to capital. I get questions all the time from different types of clients and stakeholders around, what are the best ways to raise money? What are the best ways to position for investors? And I want to touch on a few different perspectives that I have on that topic. I'll start off by saying first, let's think about access to capital from the standpoint of a founder. So if you're a founder of a startup and you're trying to raise funds, the traditional access to capital is going to be, of course, friends and family. Outside of that, you're going to also have things like bank loans. Depending on your community, depending on the type of business you are operating in, you'll also have things like grants from the different cities and/or municipalities. And so that's something else to keep in mind. I've got a whole segment of videos on venture capital financings, so I won't go all the way down the rabbit hole on that. Just to say that the venture capital financing space definitely exists, and it's something that I'll be talking more about. I think another area I want to focus on is access to capital as it relates to federal programs. And these are things like the Small Business Administration, grants, loans, access to credit facilities for small business owners. I think that's a huge underappreciated area of access to capital. There are also other federal programs through places like the Department of Defense, who are actively pursuing what they refer to as dual use technologies. And this means technology that can be applied in the civilian world and potentially in the military context. And I think that's another area that many times entrepreneurs are not so aware of, because if you think about it from the standpoint of, let's say, a federal governmental agency and the goods and services they may be buying, they will have a lot of the similar needs and issues of any private sector business. So they have workforce issues, they have HR and employment issues, and then they have technology and issues, things that they acquire related to their day-to-day operations, depending on the branch of the military or the branch of the government. And so there are federal programs that provide aid to startups where those startups are operating in an area that the government has a specific interest and focus on. And oftentimes, for various historical reasons, entrepreneurs just are not aware of those types of programs and they are not taking advantage of them. So be on the lookout for more content around that topic as well. And the other area I wanted to focus on outside of purely the founder context is in the context of, let's say, an emerging manager. And what would that mean? That's an aspiring private equity fund manager, an aspiring venture capital fund manager, an aspiring hedge fund manager. And that could be in the digital asset space, but it doesn't have to be. I'm speaking more broadly. So in that context, there are a number of federal programs as well as grants. And most of the state pension funds across the US provide capital expressly to emerging or underrepresented managers. So I'll give a couple of different high-level examples, and then folks feel free to chime in the comments on specific programs or states that you might want me to take a look at. But let's take a look at a relatively large and well-known program, which would be CalPERS, which is the California Pension Retirement Fund. They have a few different pension and retirements in the state of California, but they're pretty well known for having a sophisticated asset allocation program, managing the pensions and the retirement funds of various benefit plans as a part of the state. So for example, California university system teachers, firemen, police, etc. Texas as well, they have their own, it's called Texas TRS. Virginia has its own Virginia VRS. These are large retirement systems that manage large pools of money for the various teachers and firemen, et cetera, and folks that are part of that pension. Now, in that process, they also allocate capital across many different buckets. So one bucket, for example, would be equity markets. you'll have fixed income markets, and then you have an asset class which is generally called alternative assets. And that is where your slice of the pie, so to speak, of private equity, venture capital, potentially emerging assets like digital assets will come into the fray. And then within that, you can imagine that many of the large venture capital and private equity and hedge funds of the world, think the big players like KKR, Blackstone, a lot of the folks in Silicon Valley that are based off Sand Hill Road. These would be folks like AZ16. In Baltimore area, you've got New Enterprise Associates. These are billion-dollar VC funds, effectively. And they also pitch the various state pensions and state and national investment endowments. So it's not limited to the United States. This could be the superannuations, for example, in Australia, or the Schroders, et cetera, these large pensions that operate outside of the United States, but they're pitching them for investment dollars. And what they tend to do is they'll hire various consultants, or they'll go through various consultants, and those consultants kind of vet these projects and get them in front of the decision makers, around the world. I also don't want to leave out folks like the World Bank, IMF, the IFC. These are what you call supranationals, and these supranationals allocate dollars to various projects on a global basis. So if you're watching this and you're not based in the United States, that doesn't mean that this video wouldn't apply to you. It would apply potentially to any of the investment allocators that you fit within their mandate. So it's incumbent upon you as an emerging fund manager to sort of figure that out. But I say all that to say that all of these different types of capital allocators generally have programs where they allow emerging managers, meaning a new fund manager without a significant track record, to be considered for investment. Because if you think about it, your largest investment firms or your largest startups, they all had to start somewhere. So these programs are really designed to provide a leg up or an opportunity for folks who may not, just be in the meetings or in the discussion simply because from a timeline perspective, they're just relatively new. And so both federal government, state governments, and then pension funds, and then at the national level, investment funds and endowments often have some percentage of their mandate whereby they will consider an emerging fund manager. And so if you're an emerging manager in the venture space, the digital asset space, the hedge fund space, you potentially have an opportunity to position yourself to at least get a shot to be heard. And same thing if you're a founder, just to go back to our founders out there, your state, your locality, your specific city, they all have different programs that are catered towards helping industries that state, that county, that municipality may care about. And that is on a state by state or even a county by county level. So you say, oh, well, if you're starting a software as service tech company, how do you fit into that? Well, it depends on your specific industry. Because, for example, let's say you're in the space of cybersecurity. Well, if you're a cybersecurity startup, who's to say that in the state of Virginia, for example, that Fairfax County or Arlington or Richmond or one of the other counties and municipalities in the area doesn't have a need or an initiative or potentially a grant program set up for businesses that specific municipality or county cares about or wants to receive goods or services from. So just to give you a quick thought about that, I'll wrap it up there. But be on the lookout for more and have a great day.